All right, so welcome to the Art of Prevention podcast. And today we're sitting down with a special guest, one of my longtime friends and very industrious published author since our paths diverged a couple of years ago, Lukus Klawitter. And we met while I was in undergrad and you were in graduate school at Adams State. And you were one of my buddies. We used to train a little bit together. And then you were one of my professors. And then I went to chiropractic school. You are pursuing your PhD, or you've gotten your PhD by now, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
and you've kind of been
Yeah.
all over the place. You've gotten a lot of publications under your belt. Maybe fill in some of the gaps that I left out, because you were also a competitive runner and triathlete and coach.
Yeah. So, when we met, I was kind of at this crossroads of running. I grew up running, I went to college to run. But my freshman year of college, I started developing an Achilles injury that it just progressed in a weird way. I saw multiple specialists. I didn't run for a long time. I did, wore a boot. I had multiple examinations. I shut it down for a long time. And ultimately, I saw a different specialist. We did MRI on both my ankles, and it showed that I had chronic inflammation in my ankle, heel, and tibia bones in both feet, which is likely causing the inflammation injury of the Achilles itself. I'm just not able to regenerate. And, that was a hard thing, because he kind of just said, you're probably done running for the rest of your life. So that point is kind of what drove me to understanding how the body works. Because it just didn't make sense. There's just no way. I was 20 years old. I couldn't run for the rest of my life, kind of thing. And that kind of led us to, me pursuing my master's in sports science and us meeting at Adams State. And I was 4.5 years of not running. I did a lot of endurance mountain bike racing in that time. Learned how the body worked in a strength realm. I got back into running from there. And ultimately, that led me to working as a visiting professor at Adams State for 4 years. I got a lot of teaching experience. I learned that I loved teaching in the world of sports science. And then I went to North Dakota State to pursue my Ph.D. And I'm currently, during that time of my Ph.D., I got my professional triathlon license for 70.3 triathlon. And now I'm at Northern Michigan University in Marquette, Michigan, working as the biomechanics professor and racing triathlon, and also coaching globally triathletes and endurance athletes with a company of my buddies, Matt Hansen Racing. So Matt was actually on my dissertation committee. He's a doctor in exercise science from University of South Dakota. He's also one of the best runners in long course triathlon in the world. He's a highly ranked triathlete every year. So I'm pretty fortunate to meet the people I have along this way.
Yeah. And, you are a huge influence, obviously, as my friend, and then also as one of my mentors. And, one of the reasons that I really started or got onto this podcast was obviously my injury history. Also, a lot of Achilles tendinopathies, stress fracture, etc. And the reason, kind of like my mode of thinking for this, many of these talks and interviews, is if we could go back in time and give ourselves advice of what to do or what not to do back when we were athletes, what would that advice look like? So you've returned to racing, and now you're also one of the most overqualified coaches ever, right? So PhD and also coaching. So what kind of stuff would you tell, previous Lukus to do or not to do to hopefully avoid some of these injuries and thus kind of give you a little bit more longevity in your career?
Yeah, I will say a lot of our conversation, we were in Alamosa, was troubleshooting our current issues, right? And I think that's why we connected so much, is we both want to solve, these problems for everyone, really. But yeah, first things first, knowing like where I'm at now with teaching the body as a machine and the work we produce when exercising, the first thing first is simply to eat more. I will say I kind of grew up where the coach I worked with my first year in college, it was kind of the train more, eat less approach. And I took that to heart a little bit too much. And it was kind of the regeneration process is definitely what likely started this issue big time. And then from there, it's just kind of a snowball effect. So that's number one. And really, number two is rest. You know, but I know now in terms of like we put in so much work, it means nothing if we're not resting and recovering. Like adaptations is so important, and that only happens when we rest, right, and we fuel properly, really. So yeah, I'm a very high calorie approach, especially to triathlon now in terms of large amount of calories per hour, and that's in that sense to fuel the work, right, and it just allows us to continue to progress daily, really. But yeah, rest, eat more.
I don't know if you were like this too, but so I'm doing a talk at the Adams State Distance Camp actually this upcoming week. And one of the things I'm really going to try and kind of harp on, because back in the day, I don't know if you were like this as well, but I was very like anti-protein because I had this thing in my mind, like, oh, I'm like rail thin at this point. I'm still really thin, but rail thin. I'm like, oh, I don't want to get too big because I'm eating so much protein, but it really limited the regenerative capacity of my musculature and connective tissue because that's literally the building block of all of these tissues. So could you maybe, how has your relationship with not only calorie consumption changed, but also protein consumption?
Oh yeah, nailed it on the head, to be honest. Protein it's so important from like the regenerative process, like you said, of connective tissue, and then to just maintain muscle health as we age. So like really, like my research focus right now is the aging athlete that starts around 35. And at that age, we start to see these massive losses in muscle performance in terms of like high force production. And we need protein to maintain that, to maintain our muscle mass and ultimately like limit frailty later in life. Our bone health, everything, muscle health, connective tissue health comes from, the protein that we need. And, for how much muscle breakdown there is in running in terms of just like the impact effect, there's no amount of protein that really is, hypothetically, it's not going to make us bulk up, right? Yeah. And from that standpoint, when I incorporate strength training with most of my athletes after, an adaptation process, it's high force contractions, like high force multi-joint movements in a low rep range. Because, muscle growth happens from, breakdown of like multiple heavy reps and that stuff. So staying in the more strength rep range allows to train the muscle and the connective tissue to sustain this high force, low velocity stretch without, totally experiencing those hypertrophy effects. From a durability aspect, that our musculature is so important. If you tip over right now, you want to have some protection, right? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the athletes that I interviewed a couple of weeks back, Zach Miller, who is a Paralympic snowboarder and actually just won an ESPY, talked about this muscle armor that he wanted to develop in order to protect more of the passive connective tissues and passive things like our ligaments and our bones. And to some extent, tendons would be considered passive, but more responding to the contractile force of musculature. But yeah, that's just such an overlooked thing. We always looked at, carbohydrate intake as priority number one. And I really like what you talked about with the type of load in the weight room, because I felt like a lot of times, much of our loading that was done in the weight room was looking at us almost as if we were already frail athletes and treating us as such. I mean,
Exactly.
this is, literally like a decade ago. So, I mean, the research has changed regarding bone health. Research has changed a ton regarding tendon health and things like that. So, regarding these changes, we're kind of going and moving from, doing an eight pound med ball lunge and 10-pound like curls to doing these multi-joint compound movements with heavy weights. So what kind of things, do you program in with your athletes that maybe could have helped out you and myself back in the day?
Well, just that point that you made in terms of treating us like these frail endurance athletes. You talked about like the strength that we produce, within our muscle force contractions leads to greater connective tissue health. Look at like 10 years ago, right? When you had your Achilles tendonitis and you're doing those eccentrics, right? Heel lowers. That's a heavy load for isolating that spot under length. That is a strength like movement, short strength like contraction, which we don't think about. That loading eccentrically in this long head state puts a lot of stress on that tendon. And what did it do? It helped, strengthen, realign like those fibers, that connective tissue of the Achilles tendon and so forth. So yeah, I being in the triathlete world, to be a triathlete, it's not really great for your body. You go from a horizontal, completely prone position to upright, and then like really hunched over, flex position on the bicycle. Your shoulders are rounded in, your neck is completely flexed, your knees are really close to your elbows. So really a lot of posterior chain movements. So I really like to incorporate a lot of deadlifts, heavy deadlifts. In that sense. And then also like, more of the isolated single leg stuff like Romanian deadlifts and single leg Bulgarian squats and so forth. And it's not fancy stuff, really, but it is every joint is undergoing the motion in that sagittal plane, which triathlon, it primarily moves through, right? And running. And it allows us to kind of like keep us in that more healthy posture and position as well, because our posterior chain is just not activated as much as it should be.
Yeah, I've recently fallen in love with the Bulgarian split squat. Now I've picked up, trying to not hurt myself skiing basically, and trying to give myself a little bit of that muscular armor. And the Bulgarian split squat's been really nice. And then if we think about runners and cyclists, talk about sport specificity with that Bulgarian split squat, single leg loading in that sagittal plane. And I mean, the components of balance and stabilization in that single extremity with load, I mean, those just can't be lost on us too.
Yeah, and if you're able to, you take your shoe up and really focus that big toe, because that big toe is so important in that movement and in most movements as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I love how we've already kind of transitioned to more of the coaching and programming piece too. And that's kind of, one of the things that we would like to kind of segment: things for athletes, things for coaches, and then things for clinicians, which our clinician talk is going to be largely regarding a lot of the awesome research that you've been doing on hand grip symmetry and hand grip strength. So now, what advice do you have for those programming? Not everyone going into the coaching realm has the very diverse and deep background in exercise physiology that you have. So what are some things to watch out for when programming for athletes?
Yeah. First things first, like primarily the athletes that I work with are adults who have families, who have kids, who have full-time jobs. That's a lot of, work-life stress balance. And my biggest thing is, one, open communication, as much communication as I can give, because our body it's a system of, different processes in terms of we work as a mechanical machine. We have like our physiological systems, we have our nervous system, and then we have our mental health as well, which causes like stress within the nervous system as well as within our musculature stress. And this goes to like the comments I made, towards the athlete side of things. It's really, balancing stress with rest. If you have just an exhausting day at work, or a highly stressful day at work, or with your family, or maybe like a death in the family or a breakup, like we can't just load all this physical stress on top of that, because that's just going to bring this accumulative amount of stress, and we can't adapt and move on. And see like benefits from that. So really, we need to learn how to work with that individual athlete, to balance the physical stress with the life stress, so we can see adaptations. Maybe that's just changing intensity a little bit. Maybe it's changing volume a little bit, or like, you know, when you're just doing structure all the time, it can also become another mental stress. So sometimes I like to just be like, just go out like on a soul ride. Really is do whatever you want. An hour, 6 hours, mountain bike, road bike, running, just go out and like literally enjoy it. Stop for like 6 coffees or a bunch of pastries, whatever. Just go out and enjoy being physically capable, really.
Lucas, are you saying
we have to be happy?
We're supposed
What's
to
that?
enjoy some things in training? Are you?
Wait, say that?
We're
Say
supposed to enjoy some things in training too?
Yeah, who would have guessed, right? Who would have thought that?
And honestly,
yeah, like really, that's my biggest thing, and then also just really understanding the work that the body creates. The best thing about cycling and strength is you can quantify it in work in kilojoules. You can really focus in on the amount of calories needed to perform at that high levels at various intensities. Running and swimming is a little varied, but you need to have that good working relationship with the athlete. If that's not the thing, or if that's not the case, the athlete's not going to be successful. I can write you a month-long training plan, but that doesn't mean it's going to work out. You could have something, with work or whatever, family stuff pop up in the middle of it. And how do you know to or make changes, modify? If you just continue on that building load or building stress, we can start seeing major issues like blood issues and so forth, right? Hormonal issues, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, in the modern era, freaking Chat GPT could write you a month-long training program, could write it.
There are training softwares out there for cycling and triathlon that is programmed via AI. And all it just takes in all this data from all this data it creates, but it has no idea, like, it's not giving the motivation, like that personal motivation, or like it's not giving that encouragement afterwards, right? When you like absolutely crush a workout or something, and in some cases you just need someone to tell you to like suck it up, right? That too.
Yeah. But doing so at the right time,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. You got to know when it's right, for sure.
Yeah. And I think that thing of having someone to help you deal with the unexpected, that's where real coaching comes into play. In chiropractic school, they talked about a lot the biopsychosocial model, which is exactly what you've been talking about. We're not this just biological machine. There are all of these other psychological factors that play into the stress that we're producing for ourselves and the stress that we're responding to. And I think, honestly, maybe quote of the day so far, balancing stress with rest. There were so many weeks that I was just so downtrodden, and I was like, if I just get through this workout, then I can get through the next workout. And it turned into this vicious cycle, and I wasn't able to rest and recuperate. And a lot of that was just kind of on me because I didn't prioritize that rest, and I wasn't fueling myself nutritionally.
Exactly. When you start really packing it all in, there's not much room to like refuel, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that stuff is just so key and so crucial. So what other advice as far as, programming, and maybe let's harp on the weight room stuff a little bit, especially for endurance athletes, especially when we talk about connective tissue. And then one thing I've been reading a lot about is bone stress injury too.
Okay.
So give me a little bit on how we can stimulate bone to turn over, especially when I was in high school and I was an adolescent athlete, I got 2 stress fractures that put me out all of my freshman year of high school. I still ran pretty decently, but let's say I'm like a high school coach. What kind of things should we be doing in the weight room or maybe even on our rest days to stimulate some of that bone turnover?
Yeah, that's tough at the adolescent level just because of the changes that are happening. I mean, you have, let's say, a handful of kids that are all at very different stages in terms of like growth. At that sense, the first thing I would do is just encouraging proper fueling, like really, because that if we are adequately fueling ourselves for the stress, it's going to help with the process of recovery in terms of like remodeling bone and bone growth. Because at that stage, like, there are, 7 to 12 years from like fully like having their full bone growth, right? We don't see that really until like our mid-20s. Seeing stress fractures at that age is scary, really. There has to be a sense of volume. There has to be a sense of changing the environment and then fueling properly. When it comes to strength stuff, that's where at that age, I really just like to focus on like proper mechanics. So like at that point is a really good time to teach, how to successfully perform a movement. Because I mean, what awkward little kid that's like growing into like something like their femurs grow an extra inch and like that's the only thing that grows for a second is trying to like do a heavy barbell deadlift. It just doesn't work. You really. So in that sense, it's just fueling the bone growth, right? Their body is already behind. I just can't put more pressure on just eating enough at that point, really. And don't think like it's not like, oh, I need to eat more calcium or that kind of thing. It's just eating enough, really.
Yeah, increasing that energy availability. So then they're not putting themselves into the hole.
That's exactly it. Their body is undergoing so much stress in the growth phase. To add the physical stress of training is a lot. It really is a lot. And we want them to progress and adapt, into their 20s, not at 18. That's the biggest thing. Is you're not going to be a world champion when you're 18 years old. Like it happens throughout like the next decade of your life.
Yeah, I mean, we got to kind of think about the longevity and the health span of all these athletes and not have that. I was listening to a podcast recently, the next up mentality.
Yeah, high school coaches have to know is that they're preparing these kids to go on to the next level. They're not preparing these kids to be the like best in the world. You know what I mean? They're not going to make them an Olympian when they're in high school. For the most cases, for runners primarily.
I mean, even the most talented. I mean, if you're a sub-4 miler when you're in high school, it's like cool. Join the club of kids that do it every year.
Yeah.
That is one a testament to the quality of coaching that we have in the United States, but we can't have that like I said, the next up mentality where we're just throwing eggs against a wall and not setting these kids up for success in college years and et cetera.
Quality coaching, quality of technology and research too. That's the cool thing about sports is we're always going to be getting faster, but the body still is progressing the same.
Yeah. And I liked how you kind of framed strength training in these adolescents, because if we incorporate good form, good technique, even if they're just deadlifting a barbell, these kids and their bodies are going to soak up any training stimulus and they're going to respond because they're literally untrained because they're literally, 16 years old. So anything that we do is new. Yep. So go ahead.
Oh, I just said all stimulus is new. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So I think the way that you phrased that was a point that I honestly missed in framing the question was we just have to give them something. We don't have to try and give them everything. We don't need to make these endurance athletes power lifters overnight. Just a little bit of stimulus is going to be great. And working in that low repetition range is still going to be fine for them. You're not going to, I know there was like stuff back in the day, people would be like, oh, for my endurance workouts, I do 15 reps instead of 8. And it's like, that's just not how like physiology works, I
think it's crazy. All that's doing is this inducing like low muscle fatigue, right? just, yeah.
Yeah. And
it's delaying our immediate systems, right? It's delaying our anaerobic system. So, yeah.
yeah. And really it's all about, and if we do that low repetition and kind of slightly higher load, depending on the athlete and their training age, et cetera, we can actually stave off a little bit of that overall fatigue because we're not doing as many repetitions. So it benefits us, one, from a motor unit standpoint, but also from the stimulus standpoint, and decreases fatigue. So I feel like you're ready to jump on that topic too.
No, that's 100% like nailed it on the head. It's the motor unit recruitment, the muscles engaging in those high force, low velocity contractions, right? That we get in like very powerful or very heavy strength movements. And yet it's not causing that muscle breakdown and soreness that's limiting our ability to recover and limiting our ability to do another training session. In triathlon, some of us are doing 2 to 4 sessions a day, right? Through multiple days of the week. And even runners are constantly doing, 2-day sessions with, 2 to 3 workouts and long runs. And with the strength can't limit the primary activity, right? The strength can't limit that. It's supposed to benefit it. And yeah, so like that's primarily the direction. And it's causing, or it's creating, greater health, longevity, and then that more high force contractions that we need, right? When our aerobic system turns anaerobic at any point of the race, right? Because it's going to happen if you're running hard enough. It's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, nowadays, if you're going to be a competitive, even if we're talking about 5K, 10K, your last 400 meters is going to be under 60 seconds at the collegiate level, right?
Absolutely outrageous right now how fast the collegiate system is. It's changed so much.
Yeah. And so it's like you can't just be that super skinny endurance athlete who's expecting to just use their aerobic engine to win every single race. That might work in, small town America, but if you're going to step up to the big leagues and, travel and race, you better be ready for that kick at the end. And that's going to be explosive strength, motor neuronal recruitment, shorter energy system utilization, et cetera.
Yeah, it is flipping the switch is what it is. Yeah. You have to be able to flip that switch.
Yeah. Speaking of motor unit recruitment, let's talk now about some of the really exciting research that you've been doing. This is going to be a little bit more geared towards clinicians like myself, but I've been reading some of the stuff that you guys have been publishing, and wow, it's really, really interesting looking at simple measures that can be predictive and correlative with things like mortality, neurodegenerative diseases, cardiometabolic risk factors, et cetera. So maybe give me a little bit of an outline on why you guys chose these topics and where your research has developed. And I know that some of your personal research has diverged into looking specifically at endurance athletes, correct?
Yeah. So really, the I would say the most of the research that you really saw, and like a lot of the stuff I did in my early years at North Dakota State was, under the guidance of my advisor, Dr. Ryan McGrath. He's, definitely like the godfather of hand grip. And a lot of like, the research field is being directed towards like the aging adult and keeping, grandpa and grandma healthy later in life. And the idea was to try to like find these like simple, easy, non-fatiguing measures to give us better insights of prediction for like frailty or morbidities or chronic morbidities, or even really just the ability to take care of yourself later in life, which the use of hand grip dynamometry and your total hand grip strength. So it's like how much force your body can create by clenching. It looks like a hard rubber bar. I don't know. Like it's interesting, but how much force you can create is honestly a valid predictor of total body strength. Now, it's not saying that your hand grip strength leads to these things. Your hand grip strength is a proxy for predicting your overall body strength. We can't really, well, in some cases, we can't, for the majority of older adults, have them perform 1 rep back squat or deadlift repetitions and so forth. And isokinetic machines like the Biodex, with knee extension and so forth. Another great, or, probably more of a gold standard tool, incredibly expensive, right? And it's a big, looks like airplane cockpit. You get strapped in, right? You can't just have that in every clinician's room. Whereas a simple hand grip dynamometer, you can, right? And it takes a few seconds. It's non-fatiguing. You can measure both hands in a seated position and so forth. And that can be kind of incorporated into the everyday health screenings we do, right? So a lot of that research in terms of creating these like weakness cut points. So if you are, below this level at this age or above this level of male versus female at this age, your percent risk for either developing certain morbidities later in life increases, or the ability to, or the risk of being able to perform your IADLs, your activities of daily living, BADLs, basic activities of daily living, and so forth, decreases. And a lot of the research we found in like these large data set studies is that like every percent increase in like being below that weakness cut point, the greater the percentage of these risks we have. And then additionally, that goes to, the weakness standpoint in terms of looking at asymmetry. The beauty of utilizing this electronic dynamometry is we can try to assess different functions of muscle or different muscle functions and so forth in terms of fatigue and asymmetry and maximal strength and rate of force development and isometric control, all with this electronic dynamometry that we have, which could give us a better prediction of, what is the cause of, morbidities, actually, not just total body strength, right? Because that's just a single measure, right? So with that, we can kind of like try to draw the lines there and so forth. And also it gives us a better understanding of, the neural component as well. Because it's really hard to measure. It's pretty difficult to measure, like the brain to muscle connection. Is that the cause of muscle weakness and loss of muscle function later in life? Or is it, declines in muscle strength?
Yeah.
So that said,
A term that I
wasn't too much.
Oh, no. I mean, this is all really great stuff. And a term that I wasn't familiar with was dynapenia.
Oh yeah.
And to me, when one of the papers stated that oftentimes the strength losses aren't commensurate with the muscle losses. So the amount of age-related muscle wasting was not the same as the amount of strength loss that individual is experiencing over their lifespan. So that's that brain muscle connection that you were just talking about. And I think that you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was like that kind of like, why looking at asymmetry in terms of hand grip strength from right to left limb can, maybe help with drawing that line a little bit in terms of, the right side of our brain controls the left side of our body and vice versa, right? So kind of like more aligning that neural connection. And same thing was found, the greater the asymmetry, the greater the risk of these morbidities and so forth as we age.
Or the greater amount of pickleball that person's playing,
Yeah. I've met some pretty incredible 65 plus individuals during this time, but that's for
sure. So, and I really like how you framed it that doing hand grip strength, yes, it's a direct measure of the amount of force that you're able to produce with your hand, but it's an indirect measure of overall health and overall strength, not only of just strength in the arm, but also the indirect measurement of your ability to recruit motor units. So your brain's ability to contract the muscle, and then another measure indirectly of peripheral functioning, such as the peripheral vessels and the peripheral nerves that are innervating a lot of that musculature.
Yeah, Absolutely. Because really, we need to be able to like reach up and, grab something from a high shelf, right? We need to be able to walk up and down steps, get ourselves in and out of bed. That is the goal of muscle function, really, in the older ages of our life. And yeah, we've even looked a little bit at, radial and ulnar asymmetry with hand grip. So measuring using like our radial digits versus our ulnar digits. The research got limited a little bit due to the onset of COVID. But that being said, they're just such a simple, non-fatiguing device can allow us to, get better understandings of muscle function and, predictions for later in life.
And it's really like a sad thing that your research got stalled out by COVID, because who's the most at-risk population for COVID and mortality due to COVID? The people that you would pick up with testing hand grip strength and hand grip symmetry. So, gosh, this is, we've got about two to 2.5 minutes left. This has been way too short of a conversation. I think in the future, we're going to have to do like a real dial in on some of these specific topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, the podcast is The Art of Prevention. One thing that I always think about is Benjamin Franklin, when he started the Philadelphia Fire Department. Yeah, I know it's a random kind of like connection here, but he's got this quote that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And you and I are both individuals who have tried previously to lay on pounds and pounds of cure, when really we could have done with maybe a couple more grams of protein in order to prevent some of this stuff. What's some advice that you have for athletes nowadays? What's your ounce of prevention for these individuals as they pursue their athletic careers?
Above like the adolescent level is lift heavy weights and eat enough food. That's hands down the best thing you can do is create that muscle stress, right? Create that muscle force, get every other, major benefit from that, and then just eat enough. And your running, cycling, swimming, whatever is going to, it's going to accelerate for sure.
Yeah. Train more, eat less. Not really the way to go. Be
Not
sure
anymore.
You balance your stress with rest, and balance your stress with eating enough, getting enough calories, and definitely enough protein as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Lukus, well, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to have you on again. I'm definitely going to pick your brain a lot more on not only training, but also upgrading my coffee game.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, sir. I appreciate having me on.
This program is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Always consult with your physician before starting any exercises or doing anything contained in this program. Always stop if you experience any pain, discomfort, or difficulties performing anything described in this program.